All right, so we're going to learn some calculator skills. We're going to start with graphing a function. The way that we graph a function is that we go to our y equals screen. Let's graph this parabola. Your y equals button is right at the top left of your calculator. So I'm going to type the y equals button. And in here, you can see that we can graph any function by typing its expression in. So we can type negative x squared plus 6x minus 5. Remembering that there is a different button for negative, which is down at the bottom, and minus, which is on the right. So be very careful not to mix up the two. So we're going to type negative x squared. The button for an independent variable like x is to the right of your green alpha key. So that's right here. So I'm going to type x next. So negative x, and then squared. Squared is this button on the left of your calculator that looks like x squared. So you're going to type squared next. And you can see it even looks like negative x squared. Then we can type plus 6x. So I'll type plus 6, and then the x button again. And then minus 5. Minus 5. We're going to use the minus button, not the negative button. Minus 5. Great. Now we'll press the graph button. The graph button is all the way on the top right where it says graph. So we're simply going to hit graph. Press graph. And there we go. We have our parabola that has shown up. That's how we graph a function. If you want to exit any screen, you can go back to your main home screen by hitting second quits. Second quits. Second, the blue button second activates the second feature of a button in blue. So if you want to quit back to your main screen, you have to hit the second button first, then press, in this case, the mode button. So second quit can get you back to your normal screen if you want to just do like normal calculations like 2 times 5. But if you want to go back to your graph, then we can go back to the graph screen or hit second quit to, again, go back to your main screen. Or we can go back to our y equals screen if we want to go and adjust our graph. So let's then talk about evaluating functions. Suppose we want to evaluate f of 2. Now, this is very easy to see from your graph because we can simply observe the height of 3. So the answer is 3 for f of 2. However, our calculator can do this for us. This is especially helpful if we want to find decimal answers or answers that we can't see quite as easily. So we can go, you could just kind of normally simply evaluate 2 on our main screen. And actually, let's go through that first. We can simply do negative and then enter a 2 squared. So we can do negative parentheses 2 end parentheses. Remember, when you plug in or evaluate a function, you want to substitute 2 for x, but we want to put it in parentheses and then put the squared. Plus 6 times 2, because remember, the function that we're evaluating was negative x squared, so we'll have negative 2 squared, plus 6 times x, which is 2 in this case, f of 2, so we'll type 2, minus 5, and hit enter. You have to hit enter. And then we get 3, which we knew it was going to be 3. We can easily tell by the picture, but there's a second way. We can evaluate functions with our second calc screen. Second calc. Where is that? The trace button. The trace button has in blue calc above it. We're going to use the second calc screen a lot this year and in the rest of your high school experience. So have this memorized. We go to second, the second button, and then trace, but it's called second calc. Second calc. So I hit the second button, now I'll hit calc. And it goes to this screen. Now, we can choose value by pressing enter at the bottom of our calculator to evaluate a function. So I'll hit enter. So I'll select number 1, value. And it goes to our graph. It is asking, what number do you want to evaluate at? Well, we want to evaluate at 2. So we'll just type 2. And that's way easier. And when we hit enter, it shows our y value of 3. So this is a much easier way than just typing into your main screen of how we can evaluate a function, which is really nifty. Second calc value is how you would sort of summarize that. Second calc value is how we can evaluate a function. Let's then talk about the maximum and the minimum. Our graph does not have a minimum because it extends indefinitely downward and thus does not have a defined least y value. However, we can obviously just notice, just by observing the top of our graph, that the maximum is 4. But again, we want our calculator to be able to do this for us in case we can't easily observe it. So to calculate a minimum or a maximum function value, we're going to hit second calc, and we could choose minimum, but for this particular problem, we're going to want to hit maximum instead. So we'll go to second calc. So again, we have the second button. We go up to calc and click that. And then we're actually going to go down, not minimum. I have minimum here. We're actually going to find the maximum because there's clearly a top of this function. So we'll select maximum, enter. And it asks us these 3 questions. It says left bound. So it's asking us a question. It's saying, put the cursor anywhere to the left of our maximum. So we can sort of use the left and the right arrows. We can use the left or the right arrows to simply move our cursor just right there is the maximum. We want to go to the left of the maximum. That's called left bound, when we place our cursor just barely to the left of our maximum. And then we choose enter. We have to hit enter. And this little line shows up. It's sort of bounding. It's making these little walls around the maximum. It asks us another question now. Right bound? What that means is we have to use the right arrows to make our cursor go, there's the maximum right now, but we want to go to the right of the maximum and select enter. So I'm going to go down and select enter to do my right bound. Now my maximum is sort of bounded on both sides. Your calculator has to do this because some functions have multiple maxes and mins. It's kind of like a roller coaster. And we want to be able to specify which max we're actually talking about. That's why we even have to do this. And then the third prompt says, guess? And then we hit enter one final time so that your calculator will choose the maximum. So we get an answer of 4, which we knew 4 was going to be the maximum for this particular graph. But again, this is how your calculator can find any maximum. Okay. You'll also notice here that it has a bunch of decimals for x equals 3. We know it's supposed to be x equals 3, but there are these extra decimals. Your calculator sometimes has a little bit of rounding error, but just know that that means 3. You don't need all those decimals. And so that's our maximum. The final answer for this max is 4. It's just the number 4. That's the maximum of this function. All right. Then the last thing is we're going to look at x-intercepts. X-intercepts are the x values for which the graph or the function crosses the x-axis. An x-intercept is sometimes called a 0. This is because x-intercepts are the x values for which a function value is 0. We also know that x-intercepts solve f of x equals 0. Now, we can clearly observe that the x-intercepts are 1 and 5. However, your calculator can do this as well. As, again, it's very important because not every intercept is going to be this nice integer. It might be like, 0.1357886. So we want to really be able to calculate those x-intercepts. We go back to second calc and then go to 0. Second calc, 0. X-intercepts are called zeros. So we select 0 by hitting enter. It does these left bound, right bound prompts again. So your calculator starts you with this prompt, left bound, and we use the left and right arrows to scroll just left of the x-intercept of interest, and we press enter. So if we want to find the first intercept, we scroll with the left arrow over, and then we go, there's the intercept right now. Now we got to go a little bit to the left of it, just a little bit, so that we are left bounding the intercept, and we hit enter. Great, we've left bounded our intercept. Now, right bound. Now we go right. Now we're to the right of our intercept, and that's where we want to be. You can go anywhere to the right of the intercept. It doesn't have to be very close, but you can just kind of just put it anywhere to the right of the intercept. And we'll hit enter again for a second time. Now we have the guess prompt. So we hit enter a third time so that we're bounded on both sides, and it sort of like goes back and forth, and sort of zones in. It gets right to where the intercept is. And when we hit enter our final time, boom, we've got x equals 1. Now, we knew it was going to be 1, but this just sort of solidifies that with our calculator. And you could do the same thing for x equals 4. We can go back to second, calc, 0. But now left bound, we have to go to the left of the 4 intercept. So that's left bounding. Enter. Right bound, we go a little bit to the right of the x intercept. We hit enter. Now we hit guess, enter a third time. Boom, there's our x intercept of 5. So it's really simple to go through and find x intercepts or maxes and mins by just those 3 prompts: left bound, right bound, guess. Great. The final skill is going to be the y-intercept. The y-intercept is a value when x equals 0. In other words, the y-intercept is f of 0. So we can either do second calc and select value and do 0, or in this particular graph, it's very easy to see that our y-intercept is simply -5, but we can evaluate x equals 0 to get the y-intercept as well. You want to have that memorized. Y-intercepts are where x equals 0. And we can go to second, calc, value, and evaluate at 0, and only 0 for the y-intercept, because that goes right on the y-axis, right wherever the function is, after I just hit enter there. And you can tell that our y-intercept is definitely -5 now. Because sometimes, again, it's a decimal or fraction, so we don't ever want to just look at our graph and just assume where points are. We have to evaluate them with our calculator. Okay, there's actually one skill. I said that was our final skill, but there's actually one new final skill, using our table. Notice how there's the word table in blue above the graph button. So right here, blue table. Commands in blue, remember, they're performed after the second button is pressed. So that's the blue button underneath y equals. That's the second button. Let's press second table. Second table is the graph button. And look at this, a great table shows up. We had our y-intercept was -5. We have our intercepts, 1. There is our second x-intercept, 5. And we have all of these wonderful values. And so let's answer some questions about this. What is f of -6? We can just use the up and down arrows to scroll through and find x equals -6. So the answer is -77. What about f of 10? We can just scroll down to x equals 10. That's -45. So f of 10 is -45. The x value for which the function value is -96. So we want -96 in the second column. Let's scroll down and, oh, there we go. X equals 13 is the answer for part C. And then finally, solving for f of x equals -165. So now we want a -165. So let's keep scrolling. Oh, there we go. X equals 16 is the answer to part D. So those are some ways we can use the table to evaluate functions or solve functions. All right, so we hope this was helpful. Now you have some really strong calculator skills to move forward. Well done.